No, let's watch something chill. Especially while I'm eating the risotto. I don't, I don't need to react to anything. You know, I wanted to watch Mr. Happy's video. He talks about specifically the netcode. So I'm curious because he has played this game probably the longest out of all the content creators. So he probably has proper insight on this. So let me watch this instead. Let me volume higher. You guys should be able to hear it. So I'm just gonna chill watch this. I don't think I'm gonna react. This is educational purposes, so sit down, everybody.
Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I thought I had buried since the A Realm Reborn days, Final Fantasy XIV netcode. With the recent addition of the Fall Guys event, many people have come to notice some
Of course, the Fall Guys event wakes up the netcode conversation.
oddities in how the game decides whether or not you were actually hit by an attack, or in this case, an obstacle. This has led to many questioning the game's netcode itself, blaming it on the constant case of "I was definitely out of that" sideswipes they've taken across the various maps. Funnily enough, this topic hasn't really been that popular since Final Fantasy XIV's relaunch with A Realm Reborn a decade ago. It's had bits and pieces during Heavensward Stormblood. It really depends on the kind of content that's out at the time, but it was huge at the start of Realm Reborn for the first half a year or so. When Final Fantasy XIV came out, this was a frequent criticism, especially on Titan Hard Mode, where landslides and the notoriously fast weight of the land AoEs claimed many a young player's dreams of getting there clear.
To be fair, the landslides still make people angry in Uwu these days, just because of the netcode and snapshotting.
Back in A Realm Reborn patch 2.0, the game actually did have a major netcode problem. You see, in their haste to get the game live to the player base, I don't remember if it was their hardware or their optimization of said hardware that was lacking, but it was so bad that the game had a built-in 300 ms latency before factoring in whatever your actual ping was.
300, holy shit. Chad, does any of you play with 300 latency? Or played with at any point in any games? 300 is a lot. Especially if it's built in on top of your own. 300 is a lot. I'm thinking back on it. 290 on you. Yeah. Is it really bad? Are you getting killed by like ghost mechanics? But yeah, 300, like thinking back like when I would have latency like that, even like in League. Oh, 300 was well, to be fair, in League, it's either you have like the most minimal latency, like 9, or you have like 9,000.
So if you had 200 ms ping on top of that, you basically needed to react to things about half a second faster than the game intended you to. Basically memorize every fight and move out of attacks well in advance. I still don't know how one of my pals who is raiding from like an army base with 500 ms, I don't know how he did coil, but he did, and that just goes to show you it was possible, but that doesn't mean it was good. This issue was actually, I'm going to put this in quotes, resolved back in 2.1 when the game's innate latency was brought to, at least in the dev team's words at the time, to industry standard. This reduced the innate latency to 100 ms, and people quickly learned that the 200 ms difference wasn't really the only reason they couldn't dodge way to the land.
150 industry standard. I feel like industry standard is much lower these days, especially how competitive like esports have become. Valorant, Counter-Strike, League. MMOs aren't probably that important, but 150 is standard. Maybe the standard changed since then, since, you know, Valorant hasn't been a thing then, although Counter-Strike has been. But Counter-Strike had LAN, so,
Land. No, they just didn't dodge it in the first place. Anyway, that's the
Depends on the day. As someone who's playing in NA but live across the world, oh shit. For some reason, I know a lot of you players, like including Avi, who's another content creator. Like a lot of people play specific on American servers, and they stay there. They don't go back for ping, which is really says a lot about the game. You gotta have a lot of good things in the game if it makes you, you know, stay across the world.
last known instance of them reporting on whatever the innate latency is. We have no idea if this has improved at all. There's not really much else to say. We just have to assume for the point of the video that that's what's there. There's a built-in 100 ms latency.
It definitely is a lot harder to figure out if something is improved, especially when the conversation is that this thing that was a problem is now less shit. It's not good, it's just less shit.
That being said, since patch 2.1, we've still had that report of, but I wasn't in that, upon people taking deaths they felt were undeserved. This has frequently led back to the complaint about the netcode being bad, but unfortunately, in this particular case, that's not really the true culprit behind things. Don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy...
In Shadowbringers, we had a player in our static who started dating a player from NA, but they played on U. And when they would join us for raids, holy shit, I felt so bad for them. But luckily, they were a ninja, so we gave them a macro to teleport to like me and another person in our static. And we would just literally tell him when to teleport, so he can teleport in advance to like save spots.
Fantasy 14 should be looking to improve aspects like netcode and keep them up to date in whatever way possible. They have shortcomings in places like the delay between skills. You know how everyone's like, oh, put 2 OGCDs between a GCD for this opener and that. And for half the people, depending on what instance you're even in the game, sometimes the ability to do that can just change. And it can be really hard to play jobs optimally, even when...
Oh yeah, fucking machinists have BIS, as part of their BIS, they have VPN lists, don't they?
You have low ping. There's even something more actively netcode related that I'm actually going to talk about later in this video that does have to do with the Fall Guys event, so we'll get to that then. And also, from what more technical people have told me, I didn't know this, so this is secondhand. Please feel free to just say this is wrong, because I don't know anything about it. Apparently, the game has a somewhat predictive movement feature where the game somewhat calculates your movements before they happen to help mitigate that innate latency. From what I'm told, it's...
I don't know if it exists in 14 specifically, pardon me, but I can confirm this kind of tech does exist. It does exist in some of the other games. Though, to be fair, this tech has been around since like StarCraft 2 days. Well, I say StarCraft 2, but like even earlier then. Like, that was like the basics of AI, and because people did have to work with high latency, like super fast, fiber internet wasn't exactly a popular thing then. There is exactly a thing in game dev where the AI has to kind of account for a number of actions you might take in advance before, well, it depends on the game. But it's like racing games or, for example, RTS games where you're playing against a computer. Or let's say you play like Mario, Mario Party games. Those have that as well. I don't know about the modern ones, but the previous ones did definitely have it. Specifically where the AI had to like predict. It's an entire conversation, but like it is a thing. I can confirm that.
It's the reason why clips like this can happen to me at a super low latency in the first place. Like, I'm in that. I'm dead. But apparently people have told me that the game thinks I'm out of it because I was moving out of it and my latency was so low that it like superseded the 100 ms. I don't know. I got this whole huge written explanation about how people didn't understand how it worked, and that was essentially the TLDR of it. But yeah, I guess that's there. So if that's not true, feel free to tell me, because that's just what I got an essay about at some point. But the complaint that most people should actually be levying when it comes to stuff like Fall Guys is how the game's mechanics are communicated to the player. There's a misconception, a very reasonable one I might add, that when an animation for an attack goes off, that's when the attack actually hits.
Oh, if only. That happens only in World of Warcraft, but that World of Warcraft is...
Unfortunately,
it's an entire conversation about the differences between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy in terms of like netcode and how things work, but yeah,
that's not how it works. Final Fantasy 14 more consistently bases whether or not you've been hit by something solely based on the cast bar of
this
a
is
skill
painful
finishing.
to watch.
If it doesn't have a cast, then just like the moment the game decides to use that skill for like instant hit abilities. So okay, let's say a monster or boss or whatever starts casting a skill. You see a cast bar, and
weirdly enough, I am making notes for the tank guide I was talking about. And I am gonna touch down on specifically snapshots and readability of mechanics, because you do work off of either cast bars or animation specifically. So this is actually a very good conversation topic that Mr. Happy started.
And, you know, it finishes and the attack goes off.
Well, to be fair, the Fall Guy started it, but Mr. Happy's at least like confirming it.
If you are in the line of fire when that cast bar finishes, 95% of the time that means the game has determined you were hit by it.
Because there's specific snapshots where it registers your position, your data, health bars, how much damage you're about to get. There's a reason, like, for example, healing, specifically direct GCD healing, is not affected by the snapshot. So if, for example, you're about to get hit, let's say one of these things snapshotted you, and it already like registered that it's gonna hit you for 50k damage. Let's say you have, currently 50k damage, health, right? Not total, but like you currently have available 50k, but you're about to heal yourself for 50k and let's say another 200. If you do it after that snapshot, you live. Because GCD heals are not affected by the snapshots or server ticks.
However,
for that matter,
the animation may take several full seconds to resolve.
Yeah.
So the game's not going to communicate that you got hit by it until the animation goes off.
Yeah,
Even though
it's
the
so
server
annoying to find
decided you were
the
dead 2 or 3 seconds prior,
snapshots.
it's going to...
OGCD are what? OGCD healing? Sorry, not OGCD. GCD healing. OGCD are affected by the server ticks. OGCD, there's a reason, for example, sometimes you'll play as a white mage, you're about to Benny someone dying, but they die and you just Benny yourself instead. Or, for example, if that ever happened, if you play any other tanks besides Dark Knight, you invulned, the effect happened, you lost your HP, and you still get fucking killed. You invult Hollow Ground, you still get killed. Because as an OGCD, it's going to be affected by the server tech. If it's a GCD, if the invulns were a GCD, that would never happen. It would never happen. I get killed because people overheal me. That's brain lag. That's not game lag.
Wait until the animation would have collided with the location that it determined you were in at the time of failing the mechanic. The delay in communicating to the player is really where the problem lies. And it's funny to me because the easiest solution to that is to make certain attacks just less grandeur. You know, Final Fantasy as a franchise loves its wacky, crazy, over-the-top animations for everything. That's true in 14 as well. I'm sure a lot of us appreciate it when we just look at something in a bubble like, oh my god, that thing looks crazy. But in an MMO,
another option is to just adjust the snapshot window specifically, because like while he's dashing, they could have specifically do the snapshot specifically when he starts dashing and not when he's still casting.
It's kind of off.
But to be fair, this is an old fight. You adjust anything, you're gonna break half the fight anyway.
Putting to be black.
There's a reason we had the entire issue with remember the dancer bug where everyone got shuffled different fucking buffs?
Blasted by something you quote unquote failed to dodge server side, but were super out of client side. Even with this perfectly reasonable explanation that I'm sure some of you get and you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That doesn't mean you feel better about it. It doesn't change the fact that it feels terrible on the receiving end of attacks that you weren't envisioning.
The simplest way to explain it is only, one thing can happen at a time. Using your example, if you think you hit your invuln in time, but the execute point on the cast bar was passed, even if it doesn't look like it has, then your invuln was probably late. Yeah, pretty much. Things just happen so fast it looks more than one thing is happening at the time. But you gotta keep in mind, it's also because it's an OGCD, so it's gonna be affected by server ticks. You might have OGCD at one point, but it might take just a short while until it actually takes effect, until the buff pops on you. You know? Like, there's a reason Macrocosmos is instant, and the effect takes immediately on everyone. Like, you know how when you're healing, for example, when you're shielding people, right? The shields will pop up specifically based on distance from the target, pop on everyone, right? They're similar specifically for buffs. Let's say regen applies to people. The initial healing is instant, but the regen buff is gonna like apply not instantaneously to everyone. But Macrocosmos, because it's a GCD, I wish it wasn't, honestly. It would be a lot more comfortable to use, but that's why they give it the damage. But Macrocosmos is a GCD, and that's why it's always instant. Pah! The health just returns. Pah! I should play more Astro, now that the more I'm thinking about it.
Visually. And if you're newer to the game, what are you just going to expect the person to know that or to have to explain this to them every single time there's a new person? No.
I do agree on this. Like,
Think about your hand.
I'll get over it. I can multitask. But I do agree that this game needs to kind of be a bit more newbie friendly. Because, like, unless people start getting confused and, like, worried what's up with their, like, rotation or, like, their ping or their internet connection, until they start Googling, they're not going to figure out what the fuck is happening in this game. Why they're getting hit by invisible attacks.
No, it's confusing. So,
or, like, when can they move back in? The explosion is still happening in front of them, you know?
I'm not like saying it's an excuse. I'm just explaining how it works and saying that's not really so much a netcode thing as much as it is they don't have really quick and snappy animations. Because the game is saying, hey, in the moment we decided this attack went off, that is when you were in it, you got hit by it. That makes total sense. It's just the extra 2 seconds to actually be flung into the wall or whatever it takes. That's confusing.
Yeah.
And Fall Guys is one of the most egregious examples of this. There's so many obstacles and mechanics and AoEs going off all the time that the less proper visual tells just don't really end up well. And honestly, it's less clear than some endgame content is. You can't see the cast bars, animations are quick and sudden, and you're actively rushing against tons of other players. So when you get hit by something, you're not sitting there going, well, you know, on the server side, you know, I think I was in that, but you know, no, you're just like, come on, I didn't deserve that. You know, you're going up against different players with different latency, pings, ISPs, all that stuff who may not be having the same issues as you or may have mastered their own. So there's actually like a skill diff here, but it's in the weirdest way possible. Now that's for the parts that don't really have that much to do with the netcode. But
who saw that clip of Violet Destruction when he was like almost at the crown? He literally touched the finish line. He was like walking in it, and some other guy came up behind him, touched the line, and they got crowned. Like, like there was like a few second difference until the other person touched the finish line. They got crowned. The server tick was just so unkind to Violet. That clip like popped out a lot.
the netcode communicating to the player is actually still a thing you need to consider. And there's another part of the Fall Guys collaboration that absolutely you can blame on netcode. With the attacks not matching up to deaths, that's contrasting design decisions between how a player's death is communicated server-side versus how it's visually shown inaccurately. The other half is how players communicate their position to each other. And that is definitely something that they should look at. Many of you have either experienced or seen a clip of someone making it to the crown first, but a person behind them...
Yeah, exactly. That's the clip I'm talking about.
...claiming the victory instead. This has to do with how a player's position is registered server-side versus how it's communicated to other players' client-side. On your client, you know, you make an action like...
You can tell Mr. Happy has been dealing with so many exoflares. Like, the yellow and the pinks are just never gonna touch him. The hammers might, though.
Like walking forward, it gets sent to the server registers it based on latency, before sending that information to other players' clients. Because of this, someone on your client who is actually a bit behind you is either running dead even with you or even potentially ahead of you, depending on the distance. But on their screen, you are lagging behind them in the same manner. The truth is that both of you are probably neck and neck, and then it's gonna...
UCOP training serve for this collab. Pretty much, yeah. A lot of people are gonna be able to do a lot of exoflares. Either UCOP, DSR, and top even.
Come down to a photo finish on who gets the crown. This is the kind of thing that netcode can absolutely be blamed for, because this failure in communication is entirely about accurately displaying player positions against one another. And in something like Fall Guys, that matters a lot. Like, yeah, it's good to know that the server-side position is correct, that 14's not miscommunicating that part of it, but if they need to make an improvement on anything, this should be a top priority. And honestly, it's been a huge problem from casual to hardcore for, well, pretty much ever.
I do agree that this should be a much higher priority than fucking graphical updates in Dawn Trail. But because it's just this little event and everything else, casual, hardcore, midcore content, everyone just kind of learned to work around it. Or they're still learning, but they will eventually. I don't mind as much, but they definitely need to fucking start working on it to make it cleaner. Much cleaner. DSR, XR kind of brain dead though. Useless, you do the grids one as melee. Yeah, but it's like some people will still get hit, like, and still very confused, like, by what? Like, once a full moon, it will happen, and it will be just so fucking irritating, because those exo flares, they're always gonna be at the end of the fight, aren't they? You're gonna be 20 minutes into the fight. You don't want to die to server tick.
Ever had an issue with a tether not being picked up even though they're standing right between each other?
Oh god, the fucking tether. Now, do you remember how many arguments me and Akiza had over picking up the tether in P3 in DSR? Holy shit, we had to rewatch so many clips because of these fucking tethers.
Even if they're just wiggling a bit, or maybe you pass a debuff through someone even though you didn't actually touch them, but then on the next pull you both pass right through each other and somehow it doesn't passes. Ever been ahead of someone who has a spread AoE? You're not in each other's AoEs, but you both still get killed? Heck, have you ever had one where somehow only one person gets killed by an instant kill spread AoE? All of that are different cases of the netcode being a problem. These often occur because players are attempting to make decisions based on what their client is showing them, which isn't accurate enough in these small moments.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Fall Guys is just showing more people something that those of us who have played for a very long time, especially endgame raiders, have kind of just had to get used to. We make much more careful and deliberate decisions because we've had years and years of experience in these style of things. We know when we can do dumb things like actually go directly through the animation for an AoE because we're so used to our own server-side position and our latency that we can make that judgment call. Whereas other people who are just trying to play the game visually for what it's showing them aren't able to do that. So there's all sorts of just, they're problems. You know, I guess at the end of the day, I don't want to diminish that these are things that Final Fantasy XIV could do better. I just felt the compulsion to explain exactly what is happening to people.
No, like, Mr. Happy doesn't even need to defend this. This is like a very necessary explanation that Square Enix is not providing. But it is part of the game. Slide casting is great, but it's like newer players are not gonna figure this out until they hit some specific like raid encounter or like even like MSQ encounter later in the game. They're just gonna be very frustrated and annoyed about this stuff. So like Mr. Happy doesn't need to even defend this point. It's like this is very important information, and it is so fucking. It needs to be pushed a lot more. So like Mr. Happy is doing like God's work here.
So that when we're targeting feedback on these kind of things, that we know fully what it is.
Only issue is like specifically the feedback part. It's like, how can you give feedback? It's like other than Netcode shit. Netcode need to improve. Need to be better. Why it's not like World of Warcraft, you know, the usual unga bunga monkey feedback you get on forums. It's like, it's so difficult to get feedback on this because it's just such a janky thing, but it's so ingrained as part of our, you know, daily routine in Final Fantasy. No, this is not a real issue. You should be complaining about the relic. Mons, ban him.
We're trying to say and what we're trying to get across. Could animations be snappier so that way there's less confusion about this? Absolutely. Could they make improvements, at least I'd like to assume, to the way that player position?
Yeah, people are gonna be more angry about the fucking relic or the KFC pizza shit emote than the actual netcode of the game.
Is communicated against one another? Absolutely. I have to believe that those things are possible. Not necessarily easy, especially given that the game, you know, was kind of put together with duct tape and a hope and a dream way back in 2013 when they had to redo the whole thing. But you have to believe that it's doable and it's possible. I almost wonder if the cloud servers are going to help with anything like this at all. I don't know how the server side versus client side communication is going to work, and I'm very interested to find out when we get the data center test in the coming week. But what else is there to say at this point? We just need to be vocal about it, to speak.
I do suggest, by the way, guys, if you get like a free couple of hours, go do the cloud server test. Ooh, sorry. Do the test, even if you're from you, do it for a couple of hours, get the boost, you know. The UI is gonna be, you might need to copy your UI, but go do some normal savages, etc., extremes, give feedback on that. It's like, it's very important, because like cloud servers can actually improve a lot for us if they specifically implement it, not just as separate servers, but as part of the data center and how information goes between players. It can help a lot. So if you do have a free day or a couple of hours, make a character there, experiment for a bit, boost, etc.
About it, and
Very
hopefully
important.
it's something that's taken a little bit more seriously. We have actually seen these types of communications improved in the past. You know, animations like, I guess, like Monk Buff going off, or like Grease Lightning when they had that, or I guess a better example is procs for Black Mage and the actual registration of stuff like Astral Fire and Umbral Ice. You know, those used to be based on the animation for Fire and Ice. So if you had a second left on Astral Fire and you shot a fireball, you had to wait till the fireball actually hit in order, sorry, my phone went off. The fireball actually hit before you would get the Astral Fire buff, even though the
Oh, that is so shit. That is so shit. Like, I get like boss mechanics animation based, but it's like if your mechanics are animation based, holy, that would frustrate the fuck out of me.
already
Especially if it's animation based, that means it's also distance based. Oh.
knew you had sent it. It was waiting for the animation to communicate it to you.
I remember I saw a Japanese comic where they were confused why their foreigner tank was stopping every second, and it was because they were spamming the KFC emote gag.
So you could lose Astral Fire even though you finished the cast on time, which goes completely against the whole cast bar is done. The server should know better. They have resolved that, where now as soon as the cast finishes, it registers that you shot the fireball. It works better for procs, works better for buff maintenance. So they've shown they can absolutely improve that level of communication. It just may not make sense to do it in all places in their eyes, but I think they could still do a better job than they're currently doing now, and it's worth having a discussion about. Anyway, just seemed like a fun discussion to add, just to add my part to the mix as someone with years and years of experience in this game and all of its little quirks and all that stuff. So to continue the discussion in the comments section below, really curious to see what people will have to say about what they have in this video. And if they have anything to add, there's almost certainly things that even I don't know about it, because I don't really get too deep into things. I usually catch discussions about the stuff that goes really, really deep into how Final Fantasy XIV's netcode works. So I'm very curious to read my own comment section on this video, because I think there's probably going to be some fun facts in there that I didn't know. But that's going to be a wrap for this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care.
This was a good video. This was definitely a very good video. I feel like Mr. Happy did not need to make like any excuses or like defend why he's doing it, or like why he's explaining this. It's definitely not to defend the system, or like it's specifically to explain why some things work in a certain way. And he's definitely one of the people who has enough experience to specifically explain and lay it out for players specifically, not devs, but like players specifically. Especially the ones who are very confused about what the fuck is happening in this game. So this was definitely a very needed video, and I feel like this video needs to be repeated like multiple times, either across multiple content creators, or Mr. Happy just needs to like release this video like once half a year, just to spread more awareness about this. I guess it's hard to fix. No, it is. Because this game is not just like it's server based across the entire world. It's like, how do you implement a fix? Because that it's also a very technical fix that needs to be pre-approved by continents and countries where the servers are at. There's a lot of like green tape that needs to be done. It's not just, you know, Netcode. It's not just code. It's very technical stuff. They can clean it up. It's just gonna take time and money, and right now their priority is to, you know, release a non-COVID time developed expansion. They might improve on it during Dawn Trail, hopefully, because like after the Fall Guys event, I doubt they're not gonna do anything about it. Like, they gotta do something. They gotta. It would be nice to hear someone who is experienced with databases do a breakdown of the issue. Yeah. So, like, there are some people on Twitter, they're a bit volatile sometimes, and they're usually the data miners, but there are a lot of, like, programmers who have some experience specifically with breaking down code of Square Enix, but they usually break it down just to shit on Square Enix, so be wary. But there are some people around you could ask. I can't really recommend any of them, because I'm just recommending data miners. So, no, illegal. Don't do that. Unless you do, then be careful. Oh boy.